In this video, we're going to talk about how we go about writing software, what tools we use, etc. So before we get started, just to have a look at what we're currently doing. So we start off by writing our code. Maybe I do documentation, maybe I don't. I should be writing tests as part of the SDLC. Depending on the pressure and the feature, maybe I will, maybe I won't. These two are actually quite important for us to do. The documentation is important because very often you think, oh, well, this is a simple function and it should be obvious what it does. And then you come back 6 months later and you go like, okay, well, what is this thing again? Why does it do it? How does this interact with the rest of the system? What's required? What's not required? And you can't remember. So the documentation is important from a maintainability perspective. And if you are also creating something that is a external API, like the process API, you should know how this thing works and maybe provide some examples around that. And the tests are critically important to ensure that things work. But the way that we think about this is that, oh, I have to write tests to make sure that the quality of the code is correct. And I completely reject that idea. So I'm going to be pitching to you a brand new idea of how you should think about this stuff. It's not really new. It's just probably new to you. And then part of the whole thing is, what patterns do I use, and is there a proper separation of concerns? And so this way that I want things done is going to ensure that we do these things properly. Let's talk about technical specifications. I have this piece of code that I need to write. So the pattern is that it's 90% think, 10% do. You need to think a thing through properly before trying to implement it. And part of the point of the technical specification is to facilitate that thought process on how do I do things. And traditionally, we would write like a markdown documentation or some form of documentation on these are the components that we need, these are the functions that we need, but it takes quite a bit of time to do all of that stuff. And so when the pressure's on, we just don't do it. Which also means that we don't think through what we want to be able to do properly. These two items will become our technical specification. You need to define this stuff in the code where it's going to live, and spend your time thinking through what it is that you want to do and how this thing is going to work, and what public methods you need and what public properties you need, and what changes when I access those things, especially if I change a public property as an example. How does that affect the rest of the code? And what this buys you is that you don't need to go and waste a lot of time writing a markdown document that nobody's going to look at before. And the documentation is all done, right? So it's not an afterthought of something that you need to do. It's part of the starting process. You are busy thinking this thing through, and so you're documenting it and you're stubbing things out. But once you've gone through the thought process, now you don't need to worry about the documentation anymore because it's there. So let's start by creating a very simple class. It's just going to be a person registry. So you can see here I have an empty template. It's got just a test stub in it that doesn't actually have anything. And we are going to start implementing this like it's a brand new feature, and we're going to follow the steps that I want you to follow. To start the process, we delete our comments. We're going to quickly add the tests. So we start off with the describe. Copilot says it's personal registry file, so yeah, that's probably what you want. Here's some suggested places for you, so that's good. We want all that. We might change some naming here and there. First thing we want to do is apparently fixing this indentation problem. And then we'll say I want to have a instance of the class above. Well, I don't import it yet, so let's import it. So we're going to say we are going to import a person registry from this file, yes, except for the fact that we just want to go up one level. You'll see that the file doesn't actually exist yet. I quickly added just 4 functions that we need to be able to add a person, delete a person, get a person by ID, and update a person. So this is part of our thought process to start thinking about what are the public methods that we need from this registry for it to be able to do its work. And these are the 4 methods that I've identified that we want. Now we can actually start by creating an instance of the class and start writing some tests for it. To save a bit of time, I'm just going to do some stuff off camera, but for the purpose of one function, I think it's important just to sort of show part of the thought process and how we bring things together here. So simply put, we want to say that instance.add for me, I want to send in the ID, so I'm just going to say 0, and then I want to pass on a object. I don't really want to pass on specific fields because I might want to include or exclude other properties as I need them. In this case it says name, age. Yeah, okay, well that's close enough. Let's go with that and then say the first name I want to do is John, and then the last name is Doe, and the age is 30. So that's fine, and now CodePilot is suggesting how I can assert it. So we're going to use the get method that we haven't implemented yet to say get me the person at ID 0 and assert for me that the first name is John and the last name is Doe and the age is 30. So that is correct. And this is pretty much how that is going to work. So if we take another example here with a delete, it understands, or CodePilot understands from the context that we've done above, what kind of we're looking for. So you can see that it's now corrected that to put the ID there. So for us to test the delete, we need to add a person. So yes, that is correct. Yes, I want to delete it at 0. I can do that, so that's fine. But what I also want to do is I want to assert equals that the instance size is 0. That's right. Okay. And so I don't have the actual code here yet, mind you. I'm just doing the test. So when I'm running this, you're going to see I'm going to run into problems. The first problem that it says is like, look, buddy, you haven't even imported this thing yet. This is not a legitimate module. But at this point of time, we expect there to be failures because we haven't done anything. Let me speed up the process. I'm just going to write the tests for the other 2 functions quickly. You can see the 2 additional tests that I quickly write. So just adding a record and then getting it and making sure that we get the right record back, and then doing an update where we add a record and then we update it by that ID, changing the first name to Jane, last name to Smith, and the age to 28. When I run this, it's obviously just going to give errors, so I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is to create the file so we can actually start implementing these features. So we go to our source and we say file new, and this is person-registry.js, and we can say export for us the person registry oh wait, hang on, export class person registry. That's fine. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do now is actually add some JSDoc comments to this thing. It's part of the SDLC. It's part of wrapping all of this stuff together to say, okay, well, here's my class. What does this do? So it is a registry of people and manages, yeah, CodePilot already knows that we're doing CRUD operations because of our test that we wrote, so that's fine. And I can then say the features that's going to be in this thing is being able to add a person, to delete a person, get a person, update the person. So it's getting all this from my test. So CodePilot is a big assistance in that. Now, if there's more stuff that I want to add to this class, if there's sort of any nuances, I can do that. But since this is a fairly simple example, I don't think that that's going to be necessary. What we can do now is start to implement some of the features. So the first thing we create is the collection for the map. And now, because we've got the comments at the top, CodePilot is saying, okay, well, we're going to start with comments. So let's just kind of run with it and see where we go. So we're going to say, okay, yes, what are you doing? Okay, this is a method. It's the add a person to the registry. That is correct. There's going to be a parameter of type number, which is the ID of the person we want to add. That is correct. And then the object that we want to add. Now, where does it get all that from? It gets it from the test that we've written. Now our method is actually documented. We can actually go to the implementation. So CodePilot creates the stub for us and suggests that we want to add it this way. That's correct. How does it know to do this? Because of the naming of the field people is within context of a person registry. And so we just kind of go with the motion and just double check that everything is done here is correct. This one returns a boolean, true if the person was deleted, false otherwise. I think it's fine. I don't think we need that in this example because it's just a fairly mundane example, but if you wanted to go down that road, it's fine. CodePilot has this habit of adding additional things that you might need, and you'll have to decide whether it is correct or not. But yeah, so go and find the thing and delete it, and then we can do this and go method get. Yeah, okay, so we're going to pass in the ID. That is correct. And then that's what I expect to get. So now we're just going to put in get, and yes, we want the ID, and then it's going to do that work for us. So add, delete, get. Let's just put this side by side quickly just so we can keep context of where we are now. So we add, we've got the delete, we've got the get, so we still need to do the update. All right, so there's the update. Yeah, that looks correct, but the implementation is going to be a little bit more interesting. So let's create this quickly. We'll say update ID and person, and this is actually not what we want. So first thing we want to do is get the object. So we're going to say const copy equals this dot get ID. Now that we have the copy, CodePilot says, okay, well, you probably want to assign the new values to that copy, which is correct. I think that's about it. We'll run it and we'll see, what jumps out. Well, the first thing that came out is I put my file in the wrong place. So let's just quickly do that. And when I run this, you'll see that it says, okay, well, hang on, you never implemented dispose. So because we did this early on as just a general pattern, it's now actually reminding us like, hey, you might want to do your memory cleanup. So let's kind of add that quickly. So we need to dispose, right? So we're going to add the dispose. And the dispose is going to clear that. I also want to make the people equal to null, and because I want to be able to use this pattern like this, I'm just going to return a null here as well. So return null. And so this dispose is obviously disposes the registry. That's correct. Returns a null, but we would just want to say clearing the map, setting it to null. Let's just say clearing memory, a little bit simpler to put. Running our tests again, we see that it says, okay, well, we're asserting something that's not correct. We're saying that the instance.size should be 0, but it's coming back undefined. And the reason for that is we actually haven't defined size yet. So we need to go and add that as well. So I've added the size property and the documentation for it. Most of this was just code pilot and anyway. It's fairly simple. Now when we run our tests, we can see groovy, everything is clean. We've added everything that we wanted to add. The tests are all passing. We are now ready to do the next bit of functionality. In conclusion, when you're writing code in this fashion, you really should start with the test. Think about what is it that you want to do. What are the public interfaces that your item has, whether it's a class or a file with public functions or a custom component, and write the test for it. You know, this is the part where I think through what is it that I want to be able to achieve. And then when we do the implementation, add the implementation, but start off by adding the documentation. For the most part, CodePilot is just going to pick up the documentation from the test that you've already written in anyway. So it's, for the most part, just going to be read what it's writing. If it's correct, press tab. If it's not correct, make the change. And then when it comes to the actual implementation of things, because I already have the tests, CodePilot picks it up, creates the stubs for you. Often it will get the implementation correct for you. Sometimes it won't. So pay attention to what it's doing. This is a very oversimplified version of code. But with the experiences that we've had, you know, it'll take you 80% of the way. Sometimes you just need to go the additional 20% on your own. So use it for what it's worth. And when I reach this point, I've already thought through my code. I expressed what I want to achieve with my code using my tests. If there was anything wrong with my code, I could debug the tests. And maybe I'll do a quick demo on that just for completion's sake. But there's no afterthought of, oh, I need to still go and document my code, or, oh, I still need to go and write my tests. We're done. We're done. Check in. Go forth. But as I've mentioned, you know, sometimes you want to be able to debug stuff. And why is that important from a TDD perspective? Because in the browser, it really is just a cumbersome operation to check whether the function does what it needs to do. And these sort of operations are input and output sort of operations in any way. You should be able to test this without really needing to have the browser there. So let's create a simple example where we just want to do a brief debugging along the way as well. So we can say, okay, well, what I want to do is I want to do a filter of a person based on defined criteria. Okay. So what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to say I want to filter for a person where that person matches the criteria defined in the filter object. So what do we want to do? We want to use the filter object property defines the field that must filter on, and the value is the value to filter on. So it's kind of what I want to achieve here. So now I'm going to say, I just want to get my indentation right. So instance.filter, and yes, this is fine. That'll work for us. I guess we could probably assert it, but we also have to say const result equals and then receipt equals that the result dot length is equal to 1. We can obviously also check that it returned the correct item like this did, but the point of this was actually just to test the debugging. So we're going to add the filter in here. That is not what we want, but we do want comments, and we'll say add method filter. Alright, and the parameters that we're going to pass on is going to be the criteria, and the criteria is of type object, and this returns an array. Yeah. So we're going to say filter criteria people. Okay, so it really went and did a whole bunch of stuff here, which isn't the point. I'm just going to put a breakpoint in here and say, okay, well, I'm going to make sure this works. So what I'm going to do here is let's just break it. It's going to break it, and when we run it, it's going to say no, this is not correct. It's not returning the right results. Now I can put my breakpoint in here. I can click on the debug, and now I'm there. Now I'm going to, okay, well, what is my criteria? Okay, well, there's an object with the first name John, people. Okay, well, it's obvious what the problem is. I'm not actually doing the filter operation. And now I can go and add the functionality, and when the test passes, then I know, cool, it's working, right? And that's the point. In conclusion, TDD, it really is the way you should be doing your code. Write your tests, defining your intent, implement the functions as you need them to, starting off with the comments, then the implementation, and then you're done.